So the first model is going to be what we call the small mannequin muscle model that we use in class. Okay, and these are the muscles that we actually see. And take a look at the muscles that we're going to identify that are very obvious on this picture. So the first muscle is the muscle that you see on the side of the neck. Okay, superficial muscles to the side of the neck. Now that's going to be your sternocleidomastoid muscle, right? That is going to be at the neck area. And then I'm going to look at the muscle of the chest. That muscle is going to be the pectoralis major muscle. Okay, pectoralis major muscle is the upper chest, and that's first muscle. Second muscle. Okay, and then we're going to take a look at the muscles located at your abdomen. So the abdominal muscles in the middle. Okay, that is called your rectus abdominis. And then the one to the side, that's going to be your obliques. So this is the one that you see on the side. That's going to be your group of obliques. Okay, so I'm not able to see the fibers, so I'm not going to be able to see if it's external, internal, or transversus. On the other model, it says it's actually called the external oblique, but I want to be sure that the fibers are going downward. Okay. Now that is actually the muscle that I'm seeing here on this model, axial muscles only. I'm looking at the muscle of the back. Okay, so now I'm looking at the muscle that is located here in the upper back. That's going to be the trapezoid shaped muscle called the trapezius muscle. That's going to be your trapezius muscle. And then this part here on the top of the head, okay, that's going to be the part of the epicranius. And that part of the epicranius is called the occipitalis muscle. That's going to be the occipitalis muscle. And then the one at the bottom of the back, okay, that is going to be my latissimus dorsi. Okay, so this is called my latissimus dorsi muscle. It's a muscle of the lower back. Okay, and then the muscles that are underneath here, it's not visible because the trapezius covers it, but those are my rhomboids that's supposed to be in that area. Okay, so we're not actually able to see it because it's covered by the trapezius muscle. Now moving on. Okay, so I could see my trapezius. Okay, is a inherent trapezoid muscle that is actually that shape. That's your trapezius. Now on to the side of the head, I can see the temporalis muscle because it's at the temporal bone. That is going to be your temporalis muscle. And to the side of the mandible, right here, that is the masseter muscle. That's going to be the masseter. And this part here is the occipitalis part of the epicranius. So the whole part here of the scalp is the epicranius. And the one that's visible here from the back is the occipital belly, right? And then latissimus dorsi again at the lower half of the back. That's going to be your latissimus dorsi, right? So those are the visible muscles on this model. Okay, from the front. Okay, I'm going to take a look at the muscle of the frontal belly of the epicranius. That is the epicranius frontal belly. And then the muscle of the face, we're going to take a look at that with a much enlarged view on the next pictures. Okay, but I can see the sternocleidomastoid to the side. Okay, that's going to be your sternocleidomastoid. And just remember, the trapezius muscle is also seen at the front because the trapezius muscle extends to the lateral 1/3 of the clavicle. So this is still part of the trapezius. It's not just from the upper back. You can see it from the front, on the upper half, okay, of the clavicle. That's going to be your trapezius muscle, all right? And the pectoralis major on the chest. And I'm looking here at the rectus abdominis on the middle part of the abdominal muscles. Okay, there's 8 of this. And here is going to be the obliques. Now, if I take a look at the muscle of the obliques here, you can see the fibers from lateral going down. The lateral going down, that means it is the external oblique. So when I'm looking at it, it's the external oblique on the model that you see here. Okay. Now, moving on, let's take a look at the muscle of the head. Now, this is the facial muscles that are specific for this identification. All right, so let's take a look first at the muscle of the scalp. Okay, muscle of the scalp, the epicranius extends down to the occipital bone. Okay, and that's going to be the frontal belly here and the occipital belly at the back. Okay, and that is called the epicranius muscle. Okay, all right. So the facial muscles, I'm going to identify the facial muscles first, the round muscles. The round muscles covers the eye. That is going to be the orbicularis oculi, and the round muscle that covers the mouth. Okay, that is going to be the orbicularis oris. Two round muscles located in the facial muscles, right? And then from there, remember, usually what we do is actually put up a clock, okay? In this case, it's going to be the reverse of 1 o'clock to 6 o'clock. Instead of 1 o'clock, instead of 12 to 6, we're going to use the 6 to 9 on the left side, okay? So again, I have 12, I got 6. And then I'm going to identify first the muscle that is actually at 11 o'clock, okay? The muscle at 11 o'clock, okay, is a muscle that you see here. That muscle is the muscle called the levator labii superioris. Levator labii superioris. Okay, because remember, to confirm if it's a levator labii superioris, it's actually just underneath the orbicularis oculi. So underneath the orbicularis oculi, that confirms that it's going to be the levator labii superioris. So just underneath the orbicularis oculi. The next muscle is going to be the muscle at 10 o'clock, okay? So I'm going to actually put the muscle at 10 o'clock. This is 11 now. I'm going to go at 10 o'clock. So the muscle at 10 o'clock is now going to be the muscle that goes through the zygomatic bone. Zygomatic bone, and now that muscle is my zygomaticus. It's going to be my zygomaticus, okay? So the zygomaticus major and minor is not distinct here, so I'm just going to call it the zygomaticus muscle. And then the muscle now at 9 o'clock, that's going to be the muscle that's horizontal, and that's going to be your risorius muscle. And then from 9 o'clock, I'm going to go down into the muscle at 8 o'clock. Okay, just remember, the muscle looks like a waterfall that goes down to the angle of the mouth. That's going to be your depressor anglioris. And then the muscle that's located here at 7 o'clock, that is going to be your depressor labii, and it's inferior, so we call it inferioris. Then at 6 o'clock now, the muscle in the middle, that is your mentalis muscle. So again, make it easy, make a clock so you can follow where it is, okay? All right, so let me actually remove all the writing so we can actually identify some more of the muscles. All right, so muscles of mastication, okay? The temporalis muscle, the temporal bone, okay? That's going to be your temporalis. And then another muscle of mastication called the masseter muscle, which is inserted at the mandibular angle. That's going to be a masseter. And then underneath the risorius, this is your risorius. So underneath that muscle is now the muscle called the buccinator. So the buccinator is a muscle underneath that. Remember, that is actually part of the cranial nerve, 7 nerve muscles, but it is still part of the mastication. We're going to look at the muscle that is actually very obvious. That's going to be the sternocleidomastoid muscle, okay, to the anterior, and it goes to the mastoid process here, to the back of the ear. And the trapezius is still visible from the front because it actually goes into the clavicle. And that's still going to be your trapezius muscle, right? All right, so let's move on, take a look at some views again. Okay, so I'm going to be identifying again muscle of the face. Okay, I'm going to start with the frontalis muscle of the epicranius. That's half of the frontalis. Okay, then I'm going to take a look at the round muscle. That's going to be your orbicularis oculi, round muscle in the mouth. That's going to be your orbicularis oris. Okay, and then the muscles that I'm looking here, and I want to confirm if it's actually at the bottom of the orbiculus oculi. That muscle is going to be your levator lobi superioris. Okay, yeah, I confirm it's just below the orbiculus oculi. And the one on the lateral side, now the two muscles are very obvious. The thick one is called the zygomaticus major. And the thin one is the minor. So this is the minor, zygomaticus minor. Okay, so those are the muscles that are located here. Okay, then the muscle that is actually horizontal to the lip, that's going to be your risorius muscle. That's your risorius muscle. Right then, at the angle of the lip, remember it looks like a waterfall. That's your depressor anglioris. And then this one is going to be the depressor lobi inferioris. And then the one in the middle, now you got a split chin back here. So you got a cliff chin. So the muscles that you see here on both sides, that is your mentalis muscle. Okay. Now, the sternocleidomastoid is on the lateral superior, the superficial surface. Okay. Looking at the back, the most visible one is the trapezius muscle. Okay, that's going to be in the back. Another picture here of the face. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the things that are very visible here. We got the frontalis. That's going to be the frontalis. Orbicularis oculi. And the muscle that is actually at the bottom of the orbicularis oculi, that is going to be the levator lobi superioris. Okay, the levator lobi superioris, 29 and 30. And then here is going to be the muscle that is going to be at the zygomatic part. Okay, and that is number zygomaticus major and minor 31, 33. Because confirm it goes into the zygomatic bone. And then the one that's horizontal, that's going to be your risorius muscle, number 36. All right, and then at the risorius is here, and then the one that looks like a waterfall, the corner of the mouth, number 34, that is going to be your depressor anglioris. Okay, and then 38 is now your depressor lobi inferioris. Okay, and then from there we can see that the muscle here, which is the masseter muscle, that's going to be your masseter number 39. Okay, that's your masseter. Temporalis number 42, part of muscle of mastication. All right, and then the 35 is your buccinator. It says there, buccinator under the risorius muscle. That's going to be the buccinator underneath the risorius muscle. And then we have the sternocleidomastoid muscle here. And then you have the part of the trapezius going to the lateral 1/3 of the clavicle. All right, so again, picture here, lateral side, okay, temporalis, then masseter for muscle mastication. Underneath is the buccinator. Okay, so round muscle of the eye, orbicularis oculi, orbicularis oris in the mouth. Okay, then you have the muscle that is actually located underneath the orbicularis oculi. That is your levator lobi superioris. These are the muscle that goes to the zygomatic bone, your zygomaticus. Horizontal muscle, the risorius. The muscle looks like a waterfall at the angle of the lip. Depressor anglioris. Then this is going to be part here. It's going to be the levator lobi inferioris, and then the middle part is the mentalis. Okay. All right. Now we look at the torso. Okay. So generally we're looking here at the anterior chest, pectoralis major, Okay. And at the area here is going to be the pectoralis minor, underneath the major. At your pectoralis minor. Okay. And the front abdominal muscles, the muscles here is going to be the rectus abdominis and obliques onto the lateral side. Okay, so here is going to be the rectus abdominis. Now, if you take a look at the muscle of the oblique, you got to decide if it's external or internal oblique. Okay, so the muscle that are located here, the muscles that go down, lateral and medial going downward. Okay, and that should be your external oblique. Okay, and then there's a muscle here that's actually located that is transverse. So this layer of the muscle here is actually transverse. So that should be your transversus abdominis. So what they did was they removed the external oblique and the internal oblique. That's why the only thing that shows on to the right side is your transversus abdominis. Okay. See, transversus abdominis, transverse in fiber orientation, external oblique. That's going to be lateral to medial, going down. That's going to be your external oblique. Okay, and then, so we're not going to the thigh and to the buttocks, okay, because they're actually appendicular muscles, okay. So those are the muscles of the appendicular. So we're not going to go through there. Now, internal oblique is actually the one, the muscle here, because remember, lateral to medial going upward. That's why they identify this as your internal oblique. And then remember that internal oblique goes to also to the back, but it's deep. Now, the one on the bottom, that is going to be your latissimus dorsi, superficial latissimus dorsi. Okay, so looking at this muscle, I'm going to identify the muscle on top is the trapezius. And these are superficial muscles in the latissimus dorsi. Okay, but on this side, okay, this muscle is directly underneath the trapezius, so it's very visible that this wide muscle that looks like square muscle, that's going to be your rhomboid major. That's going to be the rhomboid major. Remember, we're underneath the trapezius. Then one on top, smaller portion, that's going to be your rhomboid minor. And then at the ankles, spear ankle, the scapula, that's going to be your levator scapulae. And on this picture, pectoralis major, underneath pectoralis minor, sternocleidomastoid muscle, okay, rectus abdominis. Okay, so I'm trying to look at the fibers here. Okay, it's actually lateral medial going down. Okay, which should be similar to this one. So that will tell me it's external oblique. Okay.